Welcome to Critical Junction, episode 31. I'm Mark.
I'm Luke.
I'm Jill.
People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, more commonly known as PETA, is arguably one of the largest and most influential animal rights organizations in the world. According to their mission statement, quote, PETA focuses its attention on the 4 areas in which the largest numbers of animals suffer the most intensely for the longest periods of time. So in the food industry, in the clothing trade, in laboratories, and in the entertainment industry. We also work on a variety of other issues, including the cruel killing of rodents, birds, and other animals who are often considered pests, as well as cruelty to domesticated animals, end quote. So this, of course, presupposes animals do in fact suffer in these areas, which many people working in the aforementioned industries have publicly argued against. Setting aside questions of how we define ethical and by what measure we can determine whether PETA's treatment of animals can be considered ethical, an organization who peddles pseudoscience, deliberately misleads the public, exaggerates their claims, or outright lies cannot be trusted. For example, consider their 2014 Got Autism campaign that argued dairy makes it harder for autistic children to function, or their message to the National Buffalo Wing Festival that claimed eating poultry during pregnancy may lead to smaller penis sizes in male infants.
I knew it.
Neither of these claims, which only begin to scratch the surface of PETA's penchant for engaging in shady tactics, have any scientific foundation and have been widely condemned and debunked as baseless, sensationalized nonsense. But for activist organizations like PETA that rely on shock value in order to get their message across, do the ends justify the means? I would say no, especially when those means involve putting people's lives at risk. What do you guys think?
I think definitely the ends don't justify the means, but I think there's a bit of a counter campaign as well to highlight the worst elements of the radicals that might associate themselves with PETA, and make them the representatives of the entire movement. So I think there's some stretching of the truth on both sides.
That makes sense. I'd like to start just with saying that I love PETA with hummus, and I think it's tasty.
Obligatory pun covered.
The PETA pun is now out of the way. I don't know if there's a deliberate campaign on the part of people who are opposed to PETA's activities there might be. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like an organization that would resort to these tactics as one that could be trusted, right? Like, just right away, they peddle bullshit to further their cause or to get their message out, and that to me just, it doesn't make them more credible of an organization. Like, it discredits them, if anything.
No, for sure. And there's alternative organizations that you can appeal to or go to accomplish the same types of goals. And there's the Humane Society or.
I suppose we never exactly know where the PETA information is coming from. Like, I don't know how it functions and how they get their information out there. Could it be that there's one douche in PETA going like, no, I'm making this claim right now on behalf of us, and all the rest of the guys are like, oh, come on, Frank, man, what are you doing? No, we don't believe that about yogurt, But, I mean...
it does seem to be like an organized...
It's an organized
kind of...
But I'm also thinking then that if they provide some sort of misinformation, they're at least getting the attention, right? That misinformation gets them attention, and maybe negative attention, but sort of like in the Earth's community, any attention is good attention. Like any actor getting any sort of attention for anything, he's like, great, people are paying attention to me, maybe I'll get a role out of this.
That's sort of a truism, right? Like, all press is good press.
Yeah.
Well, in cases like let's start with the autism thing that I mentioned earlier. In cases like that,
that's the thing that pisses me off the most, though.
Yeah.
the thing that caught my attention when reading up on these guys.
It perpetuates bullshit pseudoscience, and it's in fact harmful to people. Suddenly, kids aren't drinking their milk now because hey, look, there's a link to autism, which is just pure bullshit. Like, it's been demonstrated as being bullshit, and for some reason, I think PETA stopped this campaign when they got shit on by a bunch of scientists being like, fuck you guys, there's no link between anything. So at least there's that, but the fact that it went out to begin with is what really bothers me, and this isn't the first example of something they've done to that effect. they also the buffalo wings thing. Eating poultry when pregnant will result in smaller male infant penis sizes.
Well, do we know any? Like, did your mom, for example, eat poultry when she was pregnant with you? Or
Probably.
Is this like a roundabout way of getting out of your mom joke, or
Just gonna. Well then.
I don't think I've ever seen you laugh like that. Oh, that's great.
It's staying in.
Okay.
That's totally staying in. Yeah. So it's bullshit. The whole. So like, how do they get away with this in the first place? Like, how is this thought to be acceptable in like the PR campaign room? Let's launch this bullshit kind of smaller penis thing and see if it catches.
So I think there's like a trend in activist culture on the left side of the political spectrum, and that trend is about sort of coming up with more sort of one size fits all kind of.
Are we still talking penises?
No, we're not. One size fits all. Okay.
That's going on a shirt. Anyway.
Yeah. So we're seeing this with things like with the Me Too campaign, for example, which in principle I support, but I see some people taking the opportunity to sort of equivocate about like the distinctions between assault and more minor sort of cultural insensitivities like off-color jokes. It's all bad, so it all has to be condemned equally. Seems to be a big kind of aspect of this kind of campaign. Mm-hmm. Whereas in reality, I think you need to be able to make distinctions, and I think the same kind of thing happens with PETA, where you've got people with similar sensibilities, at least like political philosophical sensibilities, who are saying, any mistreatment of animals is to be condemned, so let's just treat it all as if people are torturing and skinning animals alive. Mm-hmm. No matter how minor or great the transgression is, to try and kill the problem with fire, kind of thing.
Right.
So I don't know how to deal with that, and foster a more nuanced but also equally effective kind of activism, mm-hmm. actually.
See, in principle, I can agree with what they're trying to do. I'm all for animal rights, and I'm for treating animals with decency. But
they are sentient beings with nervous systems that can feel pain and.
But yeah, it's the sensationalism and the pseudoscience and the exaggerations and the lies that I can't get behind. Those tactics discredit PETA and what they're trying to do. They mm-hmm. don't help them.
Yeah. So, my problem is more even that they not only discredit PETA, but they also discredit any type of left-wing activism. I think it goes so much broader. To me, it's.
So how do you make that connection between what they're doing and like other left-wing activism?
What do you mean? How do I make that connection? I mentioned the example with the Me Too campaign and.
Okay. No, you're right. Well, I think you're right about that. Like they do harm other movements just by virtue of their excessiveness and what they're trying to accomplish. I think if they were to just go back to the roots of being an organization that stands up for the rights of animals without blowing up a medical lab or mm-hmm. something. I don't know if they actually did that. I know the ALF and the ELF have done it. Mm-hmm. But they don't denounce those types of activities. That's another nail in their coffin.
So they become more or less terrorists, like animal
don't-
rights terrorists.
If they
or-
themselves don't do it, they don't
So,
denounce it, and they support other terrorist type organizations for taking those extreme types of actions.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know how much they support them as a rule, but I know there was like some FBI investigations of ALF, which reported on connections with PETA and at least some elements of PETA that were not disassociating themselves from ALF.
Yeah, it's the fact that they don't denounce those activities, right? They also don't try to distance themselves from them.
Right.
So,
but
I don't know if they're. They
but
actively
again, it
support
seems
them, or-
like there's different aspects to PETA. Like PETA is friggin' huge, right? Like pretty much anybody can say that they support PETA and I don't know, get a PETA sticker or something by contributing to them as a charity or something like that.
Yeah, or signing up to their newsletter or whatever.
I mean, you've got loads of different celebrities that'll pay lip service to PETA and stuff, or mention that as a charity. And
Is that still common though, or because I feel like PETA has kind of gone downhill a little. Like I remember maybe 20 years ago, it was a little more highly regarded. Kind of the same sort of thing with Greenpeace as well.
It may have, but you still hear it sometimes.
Yeah, I think Bill Maher is still a member on their board of directors.
Yeah,
or something.
he's still
yeah.
supporting PETA.
He's an active board member, as far as I'm aware.
Of PETA.
Yeah.
So I would love to actually see him talk directly to like the different tactics and stuff like that. But I know that him generally he doesn't shy away from ruffling feathers. Like he doesn't mind
he seems
saying
to enjoy it.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. So yeah, it doesn't really surprise me that he's a board member of PETA, considering.
He's a dick.
By the way,
Say good
if
things.
Bill Maher is listening and would like to sponsor the show, we haven't done that in a while.
But at the same time, so this is what I was going to say. It seems like there are a lot of different types of people doing PETA differently. And so you've got some like PETA campaigns that are just about, let's say, eliminating animal byproducts, or the use of animal byproducts in things that don't really need it. Like for example, in Britain there was it was found that the 5-pound notes had tallow in them, and
What's tallow? May I
tallow I think is like it's like the kind of gelatin that comes from
Goat balls?
No, not goat balls.
Hooves.
From hooves and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, I see.
From cartilage, animal cartilage and stuff.
See, like it.
So what I was going to say is like something like this. Like I get it if you're a vegetarian or you have like an ethical opposition to the use of animal byproducts for things that don't need them. I mean, that's great if you can come up with a campaign that actually raises awareness and causes them to say, hey, why the fuck don't we just use the not animal byproduct stuff that everything else uses
And I'm sure
to produce this?
I'm sure
And then,
the answer is always money, because it's just a little cheaper to use animal kind of thing.
Is it really?
Maybe not, though. No, I don't know.
That's just
it would
it.
seem
Like,
like, for example, you brought up the idea of like children not getting their milk or whatever. Like children don't need milk. There's other things they can drink. And
It's
it
not
would,
like that. That my issue with that specific example was the peddling of pseudoscience.
yeah, the false claim about
The
autism. That's
blatantly
just
false
like
claim about autism.
But
Like
what
that,
that's like
that's
directly
what
taking from the anti-vax.
yeah, and that's what I have a problem
Yeah.
with. Like I have a problem with
It's deliberate scare tactics.
It's deliberate scare tactics, and deliberate like misinformation.
so you have a problem. What you're saying is you have a problem with lying to reap any sort of good result. Like in a sense, we could say
That would be going too far. But in this case, I have a problem with it because it is harmful.
Or
saying
can be harmful?
It can
Not
be, yeah.
necessarily.
Saying that there is a causal link between milk and autism is harmful. That is a harm. It's the same type of harm you'd be doing if you side with the anti-vaxxers, right? You can't say that because there is no link. The one study they cited in this campaign, or the justification for the campaign, They misrepresented what was in that study. There was nothing about dairy causing autism in it. Nothing. And that's what I have a problem with. Right? I have a problem with... I wouldn't go so far as to say that sometimes lying can't be used to justify a good end result. Right? Because that's not necessarily true. In cases where you're spreading information that can be potentially harmful and spreading misinformation, that's where I can't.
I suppose I could see that what they're providing a misinformation to try and reap what they see as good results. Like if we get a couple of kids not drinking that milk, then great, we did it, sort of thing.
But that can be achieved through another method that doesn't involve saying there's a link with autism when there clearly isn't one.
Right.
And the smaller penis thing, like that's just ridiculous misinformation.
Well, we don't know.
No, we do know because the study that they cited, again, no, that's not what the study was about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have problems with that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So you said a second ago that you would not go so far as to say that you condemn lying for any reason or something like that, or to achieve some kind of further goal.
Because I can't blanket condemn it because there are, certain situations in which lying can lead to...
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of some Star Trek episode where Picard had to lie to get the result that he needed, or something like that. It's very possible.
Well, it's like the classic Kantian deontology kind of thought experiment about the murderer that's chasing somebody, and then and that person goes into somebody else's house and hides there, and the person who owns the house answers the door for the murderer that comes after
and says, no, that person is not here.
Yeah. Or so should that person be honest and tell the murderer that the person is hiding inside their house, or are they justified in lying? And apparently Kant would say that's not okay.
He was against lying all around, and he was trying to lay out a formula for it.
It's completely anti-utilitarian.
Screw that! I'll lie to save my life.
Well, yeah. Most people, I think, would say that there you go. In that situation, you've got a clear case where...
Except for little George Washington with his axe.
Yeah. Cherry trees or whatever it was. Cherry tree, right?
Cherry tree.
Cherry tree. Okay. Yeah, so that I take issue with.
Yeah. So, okay, that we do, in a sense, agree, though, that PETA is value-wise standing for something that we could say has some sort of ethical merit or whatever we want to say, right? It's the manner in which they're going about it, the tactics.
Yeah.
That we can't
It's
agree.
the fact that this is a group that explicitly seems to support the idea that the means, the ends justify the means.
Yeah. It's funny, though, that the fighters of ethics do unethical things, and it usually is the case. Like, I can't think of, we look at religion and stuff like that. It starts off with some pretty good ideas, but let's destroy some people in the meantime, trying to get our ideas across. So
during the opening to the episode, I kind of sidestepped the issue of defining what we mean by ethical, so I don't know if we should...
I find we have to have a few podcasts where we're defining terms and we come upon agreements for terms. If we're going to decide what ethical is, then sure, right? What's ethical mean to us? And this sounds like another
it's an important definition to have right out of the gate, because if you're not in agreement with your definition of the word ethical, then how can you argue for the ethical treatment of something?
Yeah.
Right? And does PETA have a definition of what they mean by ethical in their treatment of animals? I don't know.
Well, they probably would. To cease the suffering of animals. To diminish it.
Sure. So if we take that definition and say that they want to stop the suffering of animals, a lot of people in the four industries that I mentioned at the beginning have publicly come out and said, no, we do as best as possible not to let the animals
We killed them nicely.
Kill them nicely. But
and do we believe that? Not at all.
Kill them softly.
Kill them softly. But they say they don't like to see their animals suffer. So
that's weird. So PETA does run like these animal shelters or something like that, right? And apparently 95% of the animals that go through there are euthanized.
Right.
Yeah, they can't take
Like,
care of
and
them.
this is a number that comes straight from PETA. Like, they self-reported this number.
They
Yeah.
can't do it. They
Because-
probably can't afford to do it. They can't afford to take on...
Well, their justification is that they're not a shelter per se, right?
Right.
And they can't. I think you're right in saying that they can't afford to keep these animals there, and also they're saying the animals, because of their condition, won't be adoptable by most people.
Right, yeah.
So
People want
it's-
cute little kitties,
so
not
it's
the old
better to-
dying cat with,
Right.
with liver problems.
So they argue it's better than to euthanize them.
Right. I suppose it's the equivalent of like pro-lifers being given all the unwanted children in the world. There you go. You go take care of these now. You know, we basically have to kill a bunch of kids, or they would, and they should.
So it seems like they get caught actually in not being upfront about. So,
I need a minute. Okay, killing the kids. Moving on from they should kill
Get
the
that conveyor
kids.
belt out.
oh yeah, the babies on conveyor
Vaccination
belt.
conveyor
Sending
belt.
all the unwanted babies on conveyor belts to all the pro-lifers out there. There you go. There's a kid for you.
You brought the sound
Go
back.
fuck yourselves.
Anyway, you were saying?
It seems like there's an issue because they're not honest about what they are or about what their facility is. You know, like if 95% of the animals that go through one of their facilities is euthanized, then it would probably be better if they just called themselves like
Killing squad?
well, no, if they call themselves like an animal euthanasia center or something like that.
Roving animal death squad.
Rather than pretending to be like an animal rescue kind of place or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, because because there's like a confused message there where they're saying that they're rescuing animals from horrible conditions, but they're rescuing them to just kill them, to just and they're suffering absolutely.
Yeah.
I watched half of a documentary about Ingrid Newkirk, the founder and president of PETA, where she was doing this thing. She participates in like a.
Is she still the president?
Yeah, she is. I think so. Anyway.
Okay.
But there was this thing that PETA used to do. I don't know if they still do it. Where it's an annual thing where they drive around to. I'll call them underprivileged dogs, or whatever, people who can't afford to take care of their dog properly. And in the documentary, she sees one that's really thin and assesses that it probably has worms, so they ask the owner if they can sign the dog over to them so they can go and get it examined by a vet. And turns out the dog did have worms and, wasn't looking
No one
too
gives
good.
a fuck about the worms. Let's get rid of them.
But the decision was made to euthanize this dog. So they're like,
Rather than treat it.
So they call the owner up and they're like, well, not looking good. Things got worms. It would have to go through treatment. Are you okay if we put it down? Like, why would you suggest that in the first place? Like, can you maybe offer treatment first and see if that works and then assess it later? Because it seemed to me like she's going around taking dogs from people to get them killed later. That's the impression. I'm probably wrong in that assessment. But that's
it sounds kind of pathological to some extent. Like
It also
it's
sounds
a little
like,
bit perverse.
It also sounds like they're strictly trying to get a message across. Hey, let's try and treat animals better.
by killing them.
Well, not
that
to say that they
definitely
can.
confuses the message.
But what I mean is that perhaps they are seeing themselves as simply trying to get an education out there so that we grow to be able to take better care of animals and things like that. It's not as if solutions can just occur immediately, you know what I mean? So maybe they are strategically just trying to get people even interested in the entire idea.
So they have to come up with these weird sensational campaigns
because it's getting press. At least it's getting press.
because at least it gets press. If they're reasonable at every turn, nobody fucking talks about that.
Yeah. and nothing gets done, and all they're doing is killing animals without letting people know about it.
Sure. I mean, PETA makes use of a lot of tits in their
Love tits
in their protests and their campaigns and whatnot.
That's
What are
right.
tits?
Yeah,
What are you
they
talking
do,
about, tits?
Nudity. They have like things like I guess
like
it was
breasts.
in the
You're
like,
talking breasts.
Yeah, like yes, I
Oh,
I meant what I said. They use tits a lot.
I remember at one
I just
point,
don't refer to breasts
at one
as
point,
tits,
like
I
right
say
in downtown
breasts.
Ottawa, they had like some activists that had like set themselves up in a bathtub or something on Spark Street.
Yes, covered in
on the
blood and
corner
stuff
of
like
Bank
that.
and
Right,
Spark
right,
Street.
right.
Yeah.
See, my point was they do this because tits get attention, sex sells, right? So let's throw a bunch of half-naked women out in the middle of our protest and see if we can get more media attention.
God, and then there's another organization to try and help these women that have to show their
Right.
breasts to try and get animals help. So that's a whole other organization to help out the breasts. No one cares about the breasts, right? We got to take care of the breasts as well.
Actually, I think the breast cancer charity is
aren't they
the one that's
buttheads as
getting
well?
like
Aren't
all
they?
the monies,
Yeah,
isn't
but-
it? Like,
and isn't there some sort of a conspiracy there going on with the breast cancer organizations and them mismanaging their money or
yeah, I think a lot of the money goes to like administrative costs, like in a proportion that's kind of outsized. So not as much money actually goes towards further research in
I think
finding
that's-
a cure for the cancer.
That's true of a lot of charities,
Yeah.
and it's true of PETA as well. Like their executives and all their VPs and all their staff make they make more money than they probably than PETA probably spends on the rest of their mandate.
Yeah.
Which arguably is that something that can be defended? If it's true of every other charity, can we therefore, single out PETA and condemn them for those same practices? I don't know. That would be hypocritical. But
It
speaking
certainly
of
seems to be
hypocrisy,
commonplace. Though.
Speaking of hypocrisy,
speaking
We
of
can't
hypocrisy,
really trust I find it's a phenomenon that we've been seeing lately. I guess with the internet and Facebook and things like that. That we don't know what charities to give to anymore because we just don't trust any of them anymore. All of them have some sort of a little bit of a dark side sort of thing. So where do you guys give your money?
I
Who do you
don't
give your
have
money
money to give.
Doctors Without Borders is a good one.
That's a good
Yeah.
one. Yeah. I would support them.
They're an explicitly secular charity too.
So that's something I can get behind. But speaking of hypocrisy, I can't remember her name, but she was one
Francine.
of the. It might have been Francine. No, it wasn't Francine. Someone else.
Margaret.
She was involved. She was one of PETA's higher ups. Might have been a campaign person or something, but she's diabetic and relies on insulin, and she got a lot of backlash from many people because insulin. Hey, look at that! It was tested on animals. And here's this PETA person arguing against any kind of animal testing, yet at the same time using insulin to prolong her own life. And her defense,
that's by definition hypocritical.
of course, but her defense was, well, I need it so I can continue the work we're doing.
Well, I mean, that's how she makes sense of it, right? Like,
Yeah,
this allows her to continue.
That's a classic rationalization.
Right.
Yeah.
So she is.
I mean, if anybody needs it, then you have to acknowledge that on some level, animal testing can be a necessary evil. Then.
Once again, there's so many unwanted children out there. We could be doing all the testing on these kids. Get that conveyor belt going, boys and girls. Hop on, little Timmy. You can do it.
Well, that was going to be my lead-in to the next thing. Like, is it acceptable to test on animals when it comes to things like medical research?
Yeah. It's a tough one, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, we certainly are prioritizing ourselves, over these animals, which in a sense, I guess because I view the world as being very interconnected, I really don't, we're fucking shit up real hardcore kind of thing, and it's kind of like it's too late. Like even with the animal thing, like it's too late. We've domesticated animals, and that in and of itself was a terrible idea. Even if there's some evidence that maybe cats domesticated themselves or something like that. I don't know if you guys have.
Is there?
There seems to be, like, if we're going back to Egyptian time or something
Cats
like that.
kind of saw an opportunity. They're like, hey, man, shit is way
these things
easier
will
if
feed
we...
us, you know?
If we laze around.
If we exploit these people who think they're exploiting us.
like, for example, I don't own pets anymore, and there is a sense that I don't think it's a good idea, you know?
Are you tying this back to the medical testing?
Are you saying that you judge us because we own pets? Uh-oh!
No. I don't judge you guys. I love you guys. Come on. Hate that shirt, Jill. But anyway,
are you linking this back to the animal testing bit, or where are you going?
I'm
with
kidding.
this?
That shirt.
That
shirt's just fine.
The last time you saw this shirt, you commented on how great the shallow V-neck was. Look at this one.
Oh wow, that's a great shirt. What's that guy's name again?
Bob Ross.
Bob Ross.
Jill has a Bob Ross shirt.
His paintbrush is magic. Look
know,
at it.
look
It's
at
glowing.
Look at
Hello.
That's beautiful.
Okay, I'm really
Just
interested
a
in knowing how
shame.
you're going to link back what you're saying to testing on animals for medical research.
Mark, I don't even know what the fuck I was saying. What?
Yeah. No, so you were saying you don't judge, but
That sounds like bullshit right away. I'm like, who said this?
no, but you said you don't have pets now, and because you don't have pets anymore,
Oh, it wasn't that.
you now have a different perspective on whether or not owning pets is even okay to begin with.
This all sounds like horseshit. Whatever I was getting at.
Okay.
But let's go back to the lab thing.
Right,
What,
yeah.
what are we asking here? Is there
whether
a question?
there is justification for
right,
using
right.
animal
I
testing.
guess
in
what I was
research.
saying is that once something has started, once that ball is rolling, man, to now cut it off is there's now too many people in the world. We've exited the food chain.
Right.
So I mean, we're taking things over like a disease. You know what I mean? So we're trying to protect ourselves because we're egomaniacs and we don't give two fucks about like sticking shit in a rabbit's eye because of makeup. Like really for makeup, you know?
But
Like, it's
I'm not
pretty
saying
crazy.
like I'm talking specifically about medical
Medical,
research.
yeah,
Because
right.
cosmetic testing, fuck that. No.
But there again, once again, it is us prioritizing ourselves over animals. Like
Yeah,
we are
it's still,
saying
it's
our
still on
life
some level
is worth.
speciesist.
Yeah, our
right?
life is worth more than their life is what we're declaring. Like the worms in that dog's ass aren't as valuable as that dog. We have a hierarchy of order
Totally,
of things,
yeah.
you know? Like we do not give two fucks about escargot. We're not trying to save the escargot. We like cute things. We're going to try and save the cute animals. Seals, we can't club seals, but you go right ahead and chomp down on some escargot, no problem. Oh, eat them alive. No sweat, you know? It doesn't matter.
A little garlic butter. you're
Although,
fine.
you know what? I heard there is like some kind of new campaign about...
Save the snails?
No,
Save
about
the ugly
lobsters.
things?
That lobsters have to be
Because they
like
feel
humanely
apparently they feel
euthanized
pain
before
if you boil them alive now.
before boiling them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we actually believe that these animals are being killed ethically. I mean, they're being killed. They're being slaughtered. Like it's not pretty. We don't want to know.
What was her
is basically
name?
what it comes down to.
The autistic woman who kind of revolutionized the cattle.
Francine. That was Francine for sure.
Industry.
No, I'm not sure.
No. She has kind of a funny name.
Yeah, right. I know who you're
you
talking
know-
about. And she built that
You know
device
what I'm talking
to
about?
create herself.
Claire Danes played her.
Oh, we
on,
know Claire. We know the actress's
on
name.
some-
who played
on
her.
some TV
She's
movie.
pretty.
No, but she was
Claire
really good
Danes is
in this.
We know pretty things. We're not into having sex with autistic girls. No. We don't know her name.
What the
Wow.
Okay. Coming back from that tangent. Yeah, no, clearly we are still
So
prioritizing ourselves over other things.
the whole reason why I brought up the autistic woman was because she did come up with a more ethical way to slaughter the cattle in the meat industry, right?
Yeah.
So obviously you can again there's that nuance and distinction there that you can you can draw between
We can do better.
between unpleasant things or wrong things. You know, some things are less wrong or more wrong than others. So even if we might agree to begin with that killing animals for food is wrong, we can say that, okay, but you can also treat an animal terribly before it actually does die for our consumption,
And then the death
or
is a
you
reward.
can treat it better, and
Yeah.
so yeah. I mean, yeah. That, all I would say is that there's room for distinction, even if we do make a condemnation of, let's say any animal research or animal consumption. We can say, even though we don't think it's okay to use animals for research, maybe there are circumstances under which it's necessary or justifiable. No?
Yeah, like I think there are circumstances in which it is justifiable to experiment medically on animals, you know, because it does sound speciesist when we say that.
Well, it doesn't
we
always
need to,
sound
we need to,
speciesist.
No,
we need
it
to
is.
do it.
Yeah, it's pretty explicitly speciesist.
It is,
but
but we say it because inherently we want to preserve our own existence. I say we generally because I know what your stance is, Luke. You're going to say that life isn't necessary to begin with.
Well, not to say life isn't necessary, but the particularity of life isn't necessary. For example, I could say life is necessary, but your life isn't necessary. You know, there's a difference. The continuation, like, why do we choose the continuation
Yours in
of this
particular,
life?
Mine in particular.
Why do we choose particular life over other life? You know, why is it that the dog is necessary, but the worms in its asshole aren't necessary? You know, so we're judging,
yeah.
and that shirt is nice. I like that shirt.
I don't know if it has to do with consciousness or if it has to do
I see.
with some other variable, but there's a delineation, there's a scale of what we consider to be more killable than or more important than others, right? Like, no, we don't care about the worms in the dog's ass. We care about the dog because it's higher up in some kind of way. Isn't
Higher
it?
up, yeah, it's higher up.
I don't know how to define that, but it's, you know, at another level than the worm is.
And you know what?
Are there reasonable arguments though for saying that one thing is worthy of more consideration in terms of care and compassion than another? Like we know some facts about the nervous systems of different animals, and some don't even have a nervous system.
Like,
So
we're talking fish.
sure, or like some insects, right? Or
Mark.
Like, what if we even talk about like microorganisms and stuff like that? These are
Right.
living things, quote
Yes,
unquote.
yeah.
You know, but we know that there's no pain or something that they can experience because there's not the infrastructure in that organism to be able to experience pain.
Right.
So it's just absurd to
Unless, of course, we're assuming we understand the-
that as like equally problematic in terms of putting it in a condition that might be uncomfortable for something that did have a
Right.
nervous system, right?
Right. Yeah.
No, am I going anywhere with that?
No, I think I understand.
Toledo. Going to Toledo, man.
Like, I'm trying to think of your original question. Is there a reasonable argument to be made in defense of one organism over another? Right.
Right.
I don't know. Like, it's something that I'd have to think about because being a meat eater, I'm actively, you know, engaging in an activity that, if I think about it long enough, may be immoral. If I use the definition of morality, as I often do, that morality, things that are moral, are the things that are in the that lead to the well-being of conscious creatures, right? So if I eat meat, am I being immoral because, you know, I'm eating the flesh of something that is conscious? And did I take its well-being into consideration?
Not only that, too, but there seems to be evidence as well that we're destroying our planet by eating meat and by supporting the development of cows and eating of cows rather than the eating of grain and the growing of grain and stuff like that. Like, we are, it is environmentally bad. Like,
Hey,
eating
is
animals
anybody else
is
actually
environmentally bad.
is anybody else actually excited about like the lab-grown meat and stuff that's coming out?
Yeah. I suppose.
Like,
really
I
cool.
can't wait till it's actually made
Till
in
it's
a way
not
that I can
animals
actually
and-
buy myself and
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
people
have
are
and try,
not
like-
excited about it because it's weird lab-grown Franken meat or something, right?
Yeah.
But I
Sounds
think
great.
if you want to solve the morality problem about eating meat, then this is the solution to it,
yeah.
right? What better alternative is there to not eating meat than eating something grown in a lab that is, for all intents and purposes, meat without killing?
Yeah.
Right? So there you go. There's your ethical dilemma solved right off the bat.
Yeah.
So don't freak out about the fact that someone in a lab made this shit.
Mm-hmm.
They solved your problem. Why are you freaking out?
Yeah.
I'm freaking out.
So we're excited about this
I'm totally excited
fake meat.
about it.
Yeah, right. Have they? Because I remember when they were first developing it, it didn't taste right. Have they made advances in terms of?
So when I hear that, the whole didn't taste right, like I'm wondering if it really didn't taste right, or if it's just people who are like sort of remembering like the movie The Fly when he tests the meat that he put through the
right.
transporter,
Yeah.
and he actually switches the meat, and so the one that he told his friend was the stuff that went through the transporter. She says that tasted weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she even spits it out.
Yeah, and she even spits
Like
it
it
out. Yeah,
tastes
she's like,
raw.
oh no, oh my god, no, this is, oh. Yeah, really, really dramatic. But it turns out that was the actual normal stuff that didn't go through any transporter, and she continues eating the steak
really?
that went
Okay,
through the
right.
transporter.
I'm sure they've done their due diligence and done like double-blind studies about it. And,
Sure.
And all control groups and whatnot, but...
But like, there's
I don't know.
different kinds of weird. Like, is it this tastes weird, as in this tastes sort of morally wrong to me? You know,
This tastes like the tears of children.
this
I
tastes-
really like this one.
this tastes problematic. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
rather than this just doesn't taste like beef.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like as in that.
Well, I would assume that with meat and stuff, it's often the fats and stuff. You know, if we're looking at an Angus burger, it's because it
Yeah,
has more
right.
fat in it.
Yeah.
Whereas they're not. I don't think they're making this meat with fat. Like from what I've seen, like it's like they've created ground beef that's just already ground. I guess.
Sort of.
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm talking about now.
But, yeah. But it would solve the moral issue. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Totally.
So I'm on board with it. And I can continue eating meat without feeling guilty about it.
Yeah.
Not
So
that
what you are saying is that there is an element of guilt in your eating meat? Because I mean, I still eat meat a little bit, but I don't cook meat. Let's say I don't buy meat.
I don't know if it's necessarily guilt.
How do you eat meat without buying it? You hunt?
If I'm over at your place and
giving
you make
Okay.
a super delicious bird, I will eat that super
Oh, I
delicious
see.
bird, and that was a super delicious bird. That you
Oh, yeah,
made
was
for-
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
You're welcome.
You guys both played a part in the cooking of it, and that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
probably
that's right. Yeah, thanks
that
for
was
the,
probably the best
yeah,
bird
the
I've
support
ever
there.
eaten.
No problem.
Really, that it was so juicy. Here we are talking about the moral chicken. That bird was fantastic, I tell you. But I don't eat meat, though. I don't eat
See
meat.
how easily we can squirrel from the moral.
Squirrel. See, I would eat a squirrel. Those things are fuckers. Like, they are not nice, you know? Let's eat some blue jays.
I don't know if I would eat a
those
city
birds are
squirrel. I might eat
dicks.
a forest squirrel, but not a city squirrel.
No, but seriously,
I
have you
don't know
seen
what they're munching on.
The city squirrels are fatter because they for some reason.
How about that? We eat like asshole animals, like blue jays or something like that, right? Like blue
You
jays
eat
aren't the nice
asshole
birds.
animals.
Are
you
blue
know?
jays assholes?
They're assholes, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Have you hung out with one?
No.
Fuck, dicks.
What about how do they compare to woodpeckers?
Woodpeckers are.
Because woodpeckers have the name pecker right in the name.
Well, yeah, but they stick to their pecking. You know, they don't necessarily scare away the other animals. It's when you see the birds interacting with each other. Like blue jays
I've been
will
dive
chase.
bombed by a blue jay before.
Yeah.
That's true.
They're
yeah.
assholes.
Yeah. They're kind of
Cardinals, for example, like they have their different personalities. You know, cardinals are skittish. They're not, they're not going to
eat
scare
them?
away the other ones. I'm cool with the cardinals. You know,
Eat the
blue
cardinals?
jays, fuck them. Let's eat the shit out
But
of
they're
them.
pretty.
Not a lot of meat on them.
Oh, save the pretty things.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that blue jay autistic? Fuck it. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that.
What was your question? Something about guilt? It's not necessarily guilt. I don't feel guilty when I have a burger or whatever, but I do question whether or not I'm on the wrong side of the moral spectrum.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that in today's culture, living in society, it is very, very difficult to not live in cognitive dissonance where you are doing something like our lives do not line up perfectly ethically. Like we can't be ethical in this day and age. Like
Right.
it would be very difficult. We would have to give up working.
There's a lot of
basically, and
things
be a
that
bum
we-
and
that we-
beg and
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Well, that's why I prefer to embrace situational morality. Like, if I'm doing this thing in a given situation that might be considered immoral, in another situation it would be, because by virtue of that situation's circumstances, then this action would shift to become a more moral one. You know, in part because of the problem you just highlighted there. It's very difficult to not to do things without breaking one or more of your moral codes every now and then. So it needs to be adaptable, right? Same with, well, I think ethics is a different topic, a different area. Like, let's ask the question: are there hard ethics or universal ethics that need to be adhered to?
Mm-hmm.
Specific to the PETA question.
That's quite a big question.
Yeah,
Jeez. That's another podcast, I guess. You know, can there be?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between sort of moral realism and moral absolutism, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people confuse those, like, for example, PETA. Groups like PETA, which take a moral absolutist stance towards some sort of moral goal or value.
Mm-hmm.
And their absolutism leads them to equivocate about the relative moral badness of things that don't serve their own moral absolute value, right? Mm-hmm. Did that make sense? So,
Kill it. I don't know.
So I think that there can be like moral truths, though, like real moral truths. One of my favorite books actually is one called "Whatever Happened to Good and Evil" by a philosophy of ethics professor named Russ Schaefer Landau. And so he makes an argument for moral realism, but that doesn't appeal to absolutism, and he also argues against moral relativism and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you have like people who adhere to things like divine command theory, right? Where things are right or wrong based on whether or not God says it's right or wrong, you know? So something is definitely wrong, and we know it because we have this code that God has written in the Bible and in our hearts, or something like that.
God said.
Well,
so.
those are two completely different things. Like I think of something like some guy just reading a Bible, following those rules, and then I think of like the Abraham Isaac scenario where he's being told by God directly what to do and how to function. Like those two are very, very different.
Right, but people tend to conflate the kind of like moral absolutes and moral realism, like moral truths aren't necessarily dependent on some kind of divine command of what is that moral truth. You know, you can sort of divine, pun intended, moral truths using reason rather than appealing to some kind of outside moral code or something that's given to you by revelation or something like that.
Right. In attempting to ascertain what is moral and what isn't, you need a baseline, right? What is it that I mean by moral? And the definition that I keep repeating is
the well-being thing.
The well-being thing, yeah. So that's how I would go about pointing my own moral
like
compass.
a Weller, like something pointing the way to Weller beingness kind of thing.
Anything
like this would be good.
Yeah, like if it contributes contributes to the well-being of conscious creatures, then that action by my definition of it, would be a moral one. It would be a moral action because it's in those interests. And that, sometimes changes depending on the situation too, right? So
in that sense, there is no absolute.
I think, I don't think there are moral absolutes necessarily, but it
seems like an argument can be made for that well-being idea being sort of an objective kind of goal of morality, or an objective basis for morality.
It's more of a generality thing. Like, life is generally preferable to death. Health is generally preferable to illness. Like that kind of, like, if you take that into consideration, then you can arrive at some sort of, if not absolute, then some kind of objective moral truth. If that made sense.
Yeah.
I mean, there, I guess you're defining that, yes, we value life over death.
I said generally.
Generally,
right? Yeah. Because in certain
as
situations,
beings,
in certain situations, death will be preferable to life. If you're suffering or whatever, and that is contingent upon the other element that I introduced, that health is, or well-being is generally preferable to suffering. That's what my entire moral argument hinges upon. Like, if you say, well, if the reverse is true, then, well, what the fuck do we mean by moral in that case? Things that lead to suffering? I don't think so, because generally speaking, well-being is preferable to suffering.
This makes sense. It makes more sense to be comfortable than uncomfortable, is basically what we're saying.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So while morality is sort of on a basic axiomatic level, it's necessarily related to conscious beings who can feel the difference between well-being and the opposite of well-being, right?
Right.
Despite that, morality is not subjective, is not merely subjective, nor merely relative, because there is a sort of objective meaning, at least in like an aggregate kind of sense. There's an objective meaning for well-being when it comes to the contingency of a sentient being who can experience the difference between well-being and the opposite of well-being.
Right. So, like, with that in mind, anything lacking, like a nervous system or whatever, something that's unable to reason, that given actions are in its well-being, or actions it takes are in relation to the well-being of other similar things, does morality apply to that thing? I don't know if it does. Right? So, like, is it moral to squash a bug? Or whatever. And the higher up you go, quote unquote, higher up you go, the more that moral code would tend to apply. Right? Because as soon as you arrive at a creature that's able to suffer, you can apply that code to it. Because, again, well-being is generally preferable to that thing suffering. So going back to the question you posed earlier of why is it that we don't tend to value the worm coming out of the dog's ass and try to save the dog instead, I think that's why. I think it's morally superior to try to help the dog than the worm.
I guess I'm not sure if I agree there. I think of the things that we've tried to do in terms of controlling insect populations by throwing in other insect populations, and then that fucks up the whole balance of the ecosystem thing. I think that it's beyond our knowledge to be able to say whether or not something is suffering. I mean, I don't even really understand how it's possible that amoebas are clinging to life. Why would they be doing that? They don't have a consciousness, or is everything a substance of consciousness? Like, these are just bigger questions kind of thing. So I can't say that for myself. I'm able to see how a worm has less value than the dog. Or
I think there's a lot of like anthropomorphizing that happens when people say that something that clearly doesn't have the nervous system that's required for consciousness just because it's perpetuating its own existence or something, or like it's kind of evolutionary programming seems to lead to replication and self-perpetuation.
Existence seems to want to exist.
That doesn't that's not equivalent to consciousness. And when we say we don't know, I think it's wrong to say we don't know. I think you're kind of underestimating the actual knowledge.
I thought you were going to say the power of the dark side. And then go with the I am your father, Luke? No, that wasn't going to happen.
Luke? Do you identify with Luke, really?
Well, I have to, because people call me that, so it's my
my
job.
I mean, the other Luke. Do you identify? Do you, Luke, identify with the other Luke? Luke Skywalker?
Good. I identify with all things Jill.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's true.
On that note...
Do you know about Jainism?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
We talked about Jains.
Did we?
And a couple of times. The ultra-pacifists, not harming a single thing, kind of.
Well, I don't usually kill bugs, and when I do kill an insect that is biting me, I do feel bad about it. Yet at the same time, I sometimes have a burger. Like, it doesn't really make sense, you know. Yeah. I am a living contradiction.
Sometimes I feel bad about killing a bug, and sometimes I don't. I think I'm not super consistent. Well, and I'm not super concerned about the fact that I'm not super consistent.
I guess I would be interested in eating bugs, you know, over eating these other meats kind of thing, you know. And maybe it is due to this nervous system thing or this idea that if they are suffering, we don't have any grasp on that sort of concept of suffering. And so, where the fuck am I going with this here?
So PETA.
Bugs. Some bugs with some PETA.
Right.
Bugs and PETA.
Okay. So let's wrap it up.
Yeah, this is good, eh?
Yeah, this is good.
Final thoughts on the PETA issue. Not the bread, but the organization.
So the ends can never justify the means. And I think PETA can do better. But I also think that it's a mistake to reduce PETA to
just their errors,
the worst
to their
examples of excess there from the more radical elements of them.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think it's a charity or an organization that can actually do some good things, but that some parts of it do terrible things with it.
Much like ourselves.
There you go.
Luke, how about you?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think I agree with Jill, really, you know, like... yes.
You, Mark, you tend to have a more hardline, I think, conclusion about them, or?
No, that was one of my difficulties preparing for this episode, is I don't really know where I stand in terms of PETA. Like, they exist for a purpose that I agree with.
Mm-hmm.
I think they, like, if you take away the bullshit tactics, take away the misinformation and the peddling of pseudoscience and the lies and the exaggerations, all the worst stuff, as you said, then
nothing is lost if you take it away, and
nothing is lost, everything is gained, and I think it would help their credibility, and B, make their work more relevant. You know, do what they're supposed to do, but lose the fucking bullshit. Like,
and then in that possibly lose the media attention that they do gain.
Not anymore. No, because I think they've done enough of the scare tactics and all the bullshit ad campaigns and the fucking protests that they do to still be a presence. You know,
or have they irreparably kind of squandered any credibility they've had?
Like at this point, if they were to do a full 180 on their tactics and how they go about doing things.
That's true. People's attention spans aren't all that great.
It's not even that. It's like they've established a presence in everyone's minds at this point.
That's true, yeah.
Everyone knows what PETA is, and if they just focused their mission now, then I think it would help their image. You know, because hey, look, we're not engaging in dirty tactics anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Headlines everywhere. PETA changes direction and yada yada. Like, that would be great for them. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah.
So my stance is that I think like usual, their mandate is decent. It's something that can be argued in favor of. But I draw the line when they lie, when they mislead people, and when they spread
when they exaggerate or disinform. Okay.
Yep. Do better, PETA. Come on.
Do better.
PETA, if you're listening, you want to do that thing? PETA, if
you're listening and would like to sponsor the show, PETA, I will think about it. We will think about it.
Yeah, right. We're not sure.
We're
not sure what we'll do with that, PETA. We don't know what to do with you. I think we're gonna have to put you down, PETA.
We'll have to. Nice. This has been Critical Junction, episode 31. I'm Mark.
I am the other guy, Luke.
I'm Jill.
As always, thanks for listening, and we will catch you again next time.